Hey, work from homers, Adam Schroeder here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Naresh and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow. Thanks for your support. Let's get to the show.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa with Adam Schroeder. Today we have Mr. Thomas Moore on the show. He's a multiple New York Times bestselling author of the books Care of the Soul 25th Anniversary Edition, a guide for cultivating depth and sacredness in everyday life, as well as Dark Nights of the Soul, a guide to finding your way through life's ordeals, and A Religion of One's Own, a guide to creating a personal spirituality in a secular world, and the new book, Soul Therapy, the Art and Craft of Caring Conversations. Thomas Moore, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you both.
Yeah, and clearly in the bio that I read out, you are an expert on spirituality, on the soul. So let's start with that. How can we incorporate, as work from homers, people who are stay-at-home parents, people who are working from home, running businesses from home, investing from home, how can we incorporate a spiritual or soulful dimension into our work practices and overall daily lives?
Well, that's really a good question. First of all, let me focus, because it comes to my mind, on work, because that's what I'm doing right now, my work, and you are doing your work. I think that this is a very ancient idea. You know, it's part of the spiritual traditions for centuries, that the way you work is part of your spirituality. I was a monk for 13 years when I was young, very young. And I learned there that they used to say to work is to pray. And I think it's true that our work life then in the monastery was part of our spiritual practice. And I brought that over, as I have done many things, into my life since I left that particular way. So that I consider my work, and I think anyone can, that your work is part of your way of being in the world. It's your contribution. It's an important part of your daily activity. And you can do it in such a way that has spiritual qualities. For example, it can be ethical. You know, temptation sometimes not to be ethical. That's one thing. You can even go further and do what you can to make your work a contribution to the world. So I've done that as a writer. I try to write books that really make a contribution, that make life better, not only for individuals, but also for the society as much as I can. And I think we all can do that. Some of our jobs may seem not so much so. I think the work that you are doing is very easily seen as making that kind of contribution. You are helping people reflect on their experience. You're getting experts in, so-called, who can help people sort out difficult, complicated matters of life. So you're doing a spiritual work too, very easily. It may look fully secular, but that I liken all of my thought to bring the secular and the sacred together, and inseparable. That's the way it works best.
Your book, Religion of One's Own, it really struck me because it's a phrase that I hear more and more throughout as I got older, was I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. But a lot of people, I don't know what it means to them to say that they're spiritual. What do you think it means to be spiritual, even if people don't say that they're religious?
Well, for one thing, I think when people say that, I never say that, by the way, because I like the word religion. I have a PhD in religion. You know, it's my thing. It's my life. And I see it deeply. I don't see it too superficially. I think a lot of people, when they use that kind of a phrase, what they mean is they don't want to be involved anymore with institutional religion that is very authoritative, has a lot of medieval ideas in it, and language that doesn't speak to the modern world, and asking for beliefs that are just too far, too beyond what's with our given our knowledge today of what the world is all about. It's impossible. So people don't want to be religious in that sense. And therefore they say they're going to be spiritual. The reason I don't use that myself is that I like to deepen the word religion. I think religion doesn't require that kind of outmoded belief at all. Religion can be a way of being in the world where you acknowledge the mysteriousness of life, the fact that there is sort of an infinite aspect to life, and that you bring that into you acknowledge it, you make it part of your experience, and you live in a way that is as ethical as you can. You put all that together, as far as I'm concerned, you're being religious.
You coined the term soul care, as if taking care of one's soul, like child care. So what is soul care and how does it work?
That's really a good question. It's not easy to describe because soul is so mysterious, but I think that means that what you do is you realize that you are such we human beings have such depth and subtlety. There's so much we don't know about ourselves. We live in a massively, unimaginably huge universe or universes. And you can't even conceive of this massive world we're in. And so that's our context. And we're on this planet, and it's kind of hard to make sense of the whole thing. And trying to make sense of it and deal with this mysteriousness of our life. We are born. We don't know exactly what we're supposed to do. We have to find that out as we go. And we make mistakes. And all of that thing is such an interesting way of life. And so caring for that part of ourselves that is so fragile, so subtle and deep-seated. I call that care of the soul, using the word soul that has been around for at least probably 3,000 years at least, to describe this infinite depth of who we are and the mysteriousness of who we are, and something very precious about us. People have studied the soul all those centuries and millennia. So there's a lot of a very good thought about what the soul is. So that's what I've done. I've spent a lot of my time studying these centuries-long people who have really reflected a lot on this mystery aspect of the human being. I understand it's not very modern, that today people don't think this way, but that's all right. I think it's something that we can inject into the modern world that is something missing, something important for us, because it humanizes us, and we would treat each other better if we were caring for our soul and the souls of others.
One of the topics you touch on, one of the sections in soul therapy, you talk about how to deal with issues that arise in therapeutic style, dealing with one's shadow, and the need for self-care. I feel like, especially during the pandemic, the idea of self-care, a lot of people have neglected themselves during this time, like as they've been stressed out about things that they can't control and blame themselves for things that, wouldn't normally have been the case if the world hadn't been completely kind of turned around in a lot of ways. So how do you practice self-care and self-forgiveness and kind of allow yourself to thrive in that, with that kind of mindset?
Well, partly is one of the great teachings about the soul over the centuries is that you deal with what comes. You are not in control of everything. So I think one of the things COVID has done to us is make us realize that we are not in charge. I'm not saying somebody else is in charge. All I'm saying is we are not in charge, that we live in a world that is bigger than us, and we have to learn to move with it and be flexible. And if we can do that, we'll be okay, because there's always going to be something, either in our small personal lives or we've seen with COVID, of course, the whole globe. is faced with something that we have no control over. And that is then to deal with some of the mysteries of our existence, to see, wow, I have to live it. And this thing happened. Don't even, we're beginning to find out maybe where it came from, but it's something that just I have nothing I can do about, and I have to change my life entirely about it. Can I do that? Do I have that kind of flexibility? We learn the lesson of flexibility and of responding to life as it presents itself to us. I think that's one of the great challenges of caring for our soul.
You also coined the term, you've coined many, many different terms, but there's some that stood out more than others. And you talk about living a therapeutic lifestyle. So what is a therapeutic lifestyle, and what is your recipe for living a therapeutic lifestyle?
The word therapy is very ancient too. And so I use it, I don't use it in just the modern sense. In fact, I don't even call myself a therapist in the modern sense. It's more in the ancient, long-standing sense of the word. Therapy means to care for or to serve. It doesn't mean to fix. It's nothing medical, and it doesn't mean to solve problems. It means to care for, to bring care, and to serve the life that you've got. So when I say therapeutic, using therapy in this book, I'm using that bigger sense and deeper sense that we can, first of all, we can care for the people around us and the people who are in need, because we all find ourselves at times in great need and distress. And the interesting thing about human life is that two human beings talking to each other can actually relieve distress and can be healing. It's almost like a medical thing. It's amazing that you can have lunch with someone and have a really heart-to-heart conversation, and that person may be relieved of some of the pressure and the pain that they have felt. They may be able to sort out more of what's happening to them and clarify what's happening. Clarification is one of the purposes of therapy, of a therapeutic way of being. So this has all been sorted out a bit in history, and what I do in my work is try to bring some of that old history and some of these old terms into modern life so that we can benefit from them and maybe deepen the life we live. Modern life, I think, is too shallow and too compulsive, and it could use some therapy. So that's what I try to do with my books.
Yeah, my wife says everybody would benefit from going to some form of therapy or another.
Yes, I think so too. I agree that everyone should be in therapy, but we can do it in many ways. You don't have to just go and pay somebody to talk to you. You can go out with your friend and have a deep conversation. That can do it too.
Yeah, so you talk about a dark night of the soul. That's one of your books, The Dark Nights of the Soul. And you say it's not a psychological syndrome, but
No.
you explore how our anxieties nowadays can actually be used as transforming rites of passage, as you say. Can you talk a little bit about how you can do that?
That's good. Yes, that's the essence of that book. That the things that we go through are not just psychological. They have to do with our being humans and going through the experience of human beings. That's not psychological, really. It's just who we are. And human beings go through periods of darkness where they don't know what's going on, or they may be depressed. When I first wrote that book, I thought I'd use the phrase dark nights of the soul instead of depression. I don't like that word depression very much because it doesn't say what's really going on with us. But you may have an illness, where a lot of people are getting sick and it kind of stops them, and they don't know. They think about their mortality and they get depressed, and they don't know what their future is going to be. And it may last a long time. Dark nights usually last a while. So that can be something that really, you really need some care when that's happening, not just physical care, but soul care, I would say, because your soul is suffering. Deep down you're suffering. And if you can have someone who can talk to you in a way that makes you feel like you can handle this thing and gives you hope and relieves some of the pain of it, That's worth a huge amount. And a lot of people can do that. When a doctor talks to you when you're really sick, and maybe you just had a surgery, and is friendly to you and warm and says some nice words to you, that can be as healing as the surgery in some ways, in a certain sense. Nurses are very good at doing that kind of thing. Sometimes they're bad. Sometimes I've talked to doctors and they tell me, what can I say? I don't know what to talk about. And I tell them, talk about the weather, just anything. Just be friendly. And that is therapeutic. That's a therapeutic way of being.
How can we sense sacredness in even ordinary things? You talk a bit about just cherishing life and just being thankful. So, what are your tips for sacredness in even ordinary, everyday, mundane things?
One way is to just develop a philosophy of life. Everyone should have a philosophy of life. You've lived for a while, even if you're young. You've lived for a while. You've probably read a few things. You've seen some good films. You become sophisticated gradually about life. And you might realize that some things are incredibly precious, so precious as to be called sacred. I often write about a farmhouse where when I was a kid, I grew up on this farm in upstate New York, and after time, I go back to it. I can even go back to that land now when I visit in that area, and I go to that place, and I'm telling you, that place is sacred in my own way. For me, maybe not for anybody else, but for me, it's a very sacred place. Even the trees there that I recognize, they have a sacredness. They're beyond valuable. They're beyond important. They have a sacredness to them, and that's how that becomes. Where I live right now in New Hampshire, I live next to a mountain, Mount Monadnock, that has a long tradition of being a sacred mountain. It's just a mountain, but it has a sacredness. And one time we had a conversation among a number of our citizens of our town around here, and I was amazed how many people stood up and said the mountain was sacred to them. That meant that it was very important that it shaped their lives and that they could look up to that mountain and be inspired, and they could climb it and feel that they have done something for their lives. That is essentially very important. So I think maybe it's the way we perceive it. It's certainly a part of our imagination to imagine the world as being sacred and related to the whole, to the infinite, to the all, to everything. And you don't have to follow any particular church or teaching to do that. You can just educate yourself. And I think you can learn a great deal from the religious traditions how to do this, but you don't have to become a member to do it. I think I'll leave it at that.
So why did you leave the monastery? You were there for over a decade, and then you decided to leave. What led to that?
I think it was, there's so many answers to that. I think it was that I was just developing. I outgrew it in a sense, or I had to move to the next stage. When you look at my life, I was studying to be a priest when I was in the monastery, and I was a monk, but I was also studying to be a priest. And now when I look at my life, when I left there, I actually expanded that life. I didn't stop it. Ever since, now as a writer, I'm invited, because of the books I write, I'm invited to give sermons in cathedrals and in churches of all denominations. So that's an expansion of what I expected my life to be when I was a monk. It's a further development, and that's what I think happened. I had the slight indication. I didn't know all that, but I had this intuition, this sense that that I wanted to be in a bigger world. I didn't know where I was headed, but I left, and I was certain at that moment when I realized that now it's become too tight for me. It's too tight. I need a bigger world. I don't want to lose what I had, which is so precious in that monastic life, but it was time to leave, and I was certain of that.
Yeah, so whenever you talked about kind of religion in today's world and people not wanting to be tied to it, do you think if religions kind of shifted away from the medieval practices that you talked about, and kind of embraced people more, that people would go back towards it and it would improve the world? Or do you think we're just kind of the way we are and it's not going to happen, and even if people went back it wouldn't help? Or what do you think could be done there?
The first thing you said, word for word, what you said, absolutely. That's what I think about it. I think if the religions could not adapt to the modern world, I don't mean that, could just lose some of the old-fashioned thing. A lot of the things that they've done and said are not too good. And
There have been one or two missteps.
yeah, there's a lot of missteps. And they've been moralistic and dogmatists and just really terrible, and very narrow-minded. And although a lot of the core has been really good, and if you look at the original text, I've translated the Gospels from Christianity. I've translated those from the Greek. I published them, and I think they are very awesome. They are really inspiring, and they could be terrific. But Christianity has made a lot of mistakes, and I think it's time to totally regroup. If religions would open their hearts and minds up and regroup and not be so caught up in themselves and their traditions and not wanting so much power and control, all that stuff contradicts their very teaching. If they could open themselves up, and not just Christianity, but all the religions, they've all become too fossilized. And it's a shame, and it's a judgment on them. They should, it's all selfish, that self-centered, that kind of, and they've drawn away from people, and they just keep people with gray hair. They're just the old people go to the churches now, and it's a sad thing. And they're becoming museums. It's a terrible, terrible situation. And we need it more than ever. We need a grand vision. We need moral inspiration. We need example. In my tradition in Catholics, we have the saints, the example. We need all that, but we don't have it because the religions haven't had the imagination or the courage.
Thomas More, multiple New York Times best-selling author. Check out all of his books on Amazon, and the new book, Soul Therapy, The Art and Craft of Caring Conversations. The website is thomasmoresoul.com. That's MOORE, thomasmoresoul.com. Thomas, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners, or anything else you want to promote?
I just want to, I would just say that if people read this book, I would encourage them to be particularly therapeutic toward the world, to realize that our world is suffering. Our country is psychologically weak at the moment, has a lot of neuroses showing themselves. It needs therapy. And that means you can speak more and act more therapeutically toward our country and toward the world.
Thomas More, thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home Show. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. Get on our mailing list. Leave us reviews on whatever podcasting platform you use to listen to us. Email us, hello@workfromhomeshow.com, if you have any questions. And until next week, keep on working from home.